What's up, everyone? Welcome to Trucksafe Live. I'm Jared, and we also have Brandon Wiseman, who, like me, is a total trucking industry junkie. This is a show designed to tackle tough issues in the trucking industry. We always try to bring in great guests that can speak on the show topics, so you don't have to just listen to myself and Brandon flap our gums the entire time. If you've not seen our prior shows, you can find them on Apple or Google Podcast, as well as Spotify or YouTube. We've had shows on nuclear verdicts, telematics, and also independent contractor issues. So check those out if you're interested in some free and insightful DOT content. Today, we're going to get a live update from the ATA's Management Conference and Exhibition, or MCE21, that's being held in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. I know I speak for Brandon as well as myself when I say, we wish we were there right now. And I suspect there's a lot of listeners right now that also couldn't make the show. So, Brandon, are you ready to rock today?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, for those who aren't familiar with the MCE conference, it's one of the larger annual industry conferences. It usually draws, over 4,000 trucking executives and senior managers. As Jared said, this year it was in Nashville. The theme was celebrating the growth of trucking. It just wrapped up, at least the main sessions today. It's been going on since this past weekend. Some of the highlights included President Chris Spears' State of the Industry and Association address, the American Transportation Research Institute's release of its annual top industry issues, and then some policy committee meetings. So we're excited to have our friend Brian Runnels, VP of Safety for Reliance Partners, on with us today. Brian's we're jealous of him. He's live from Nashville. He's been there all weekend and is going to be joining us today. So let's get Brian on here. Brian, welcome.
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing? Greetings from Nashville.
Yeah, we're doing well, thanks. Not as well as you.
It's not bad. It's a good city to have a conference in. We showed up on Sunday and they had a Titans game going on, so a lot of people took customers and stuff to the Titans football game, and you can't go wrong with Broadway and everything that's going on down there. Plus, oh yeah, by the way, the conference has been pretty good. A lot of good information, um, a lot of things to get caught up on, seeing folks that maybe you haven't seen in a while. But this is kind of the tail end of conference season, and they finished it off strong with probably the largest one there is.
Excellent. Sounds like it's the tail end there. What are you sitting in front of? Is that a truck trailer?
That's a trailer. That is that was the truck. Which one is this? Trucking Moves America Forward trailer. I couldn't remember. I had to sit right in front of it, but brought to you by Cargo Transporters. So it's their piece of equipment, and it's
Not
right
sponsored.
at the entrance when you walk in. So this is what you get when you walk right in the joint.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was going to ask you real quick, Brian. You have experience in risk, safety, and experience as a driver as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what Reliance Partners does as well?
Sure. Reliance is a retail commercial insurance agency. I'm their VP of safety. We put a safety program together just recently to give our customers a value-added service. We like to think that we're coming at it a little bit differently than some of the other safety programs out there. Myself and Robert Cafferly, my director of safety, we both have driving experience. I've got 20 years in. He's got 7 years in. He came up through the HR and operations side after his driving career. I came up through safety and driver training. So we like to attack things from a whole bunch of different ways, and I think that we can really sit down and discuss with a safety manager or a C-suite level person at a company just about any heartache they have and how we can assist in making it better for them.
Great. Hey, Brian, so talk to us about the MCE event for those who haven't been or don't know what to expect. Just give us a general feel for what it's about, what it involves, what kind of activities are going on.
Sure. Yeah. The MCE, that is, ATA is very much a regulatory driven and growth driven organization, like they say right there, the growth of trucking. So from the very, very beginning, whether it's the committee meetings, I'm involved with a lot of the workforce type stuff, or the board of directors meetings. All these different committees meet on all different topics that are important to the trucking industry, for regulatory and, let's say, lobbying Washington to try to get our message across as a trucking industry, to the things that we need to make the country go. So, involvement there, these organizations and associations are important to the industry, and you can get a lot out of them, but you got to put something into them as well. You get out of it what you put into it. And then, with Chris talking about in his speech yesterday, some of the things, the challenges that the industry is having with the shortage of drivers, the drivers that we do have sitting and waiting, the positive things that came out of the speech yesterday were, where the infrastructure bill stands and the things that are in the infrastructure bill, the things that were out of the infrastructure bill, whole bunch of different topics that he brought up during his speech. And it was interesting when he first started it. He mentioned the ships, he mentioned chips, and I was trying to add a third word there to, okay, how can this be something? And I added trips to it. So it's, he talked about the ships that are sitting in port, and we can't get, the freight onto land to get it in the supply chain here in the U.S. He talked about the chip shortage, which is affecting all aspects of getting parts, getting new trucks, and things like that. And then I added the trips, and it was just basically, we don't have enough drivers to take the trips that are out there.
Yeah.
So it's, that was a first big piece of his speech, was talking about that.
Yeah, I saw the headline of his was, "It's time for the industry to get loud." So what are we getting loud about?
Yeah, getting loud about just being active in your calls, like the calls on Washington that we do, to keep putting the pressure on Washington to get our message across, because we're seeing some positives come out of what that is, and that is like the lawsuit abuse. We've seen some major movement in a few states. Forgive me if I miss them, but he mentioned Iowa, West Virginia, Montana, Louisiana, Texas, Missouri. Like I said, there might be a couple that I missed, but all of those states now have passed some sort of lawsuit abuse legislation. So
yeah, that's great. Just we were talking before the show, Brian. Our first show that we did for Trucksafe Live was all about nuclear verdicts and the tremendous impact that's having on the industry and has been for the last several years. And we had Steve Bryan from Blue Wire on, and we also had John Esparza from the Texas Trucking Association. And we heard a lot from John about Texas's efforts to get that legislation pushed through, HB 19. And we were glad to see they got that pushed through, and glad to hear that there's other states that have similar legislation on the books, just because, again, it's those cases, as we discussed in that show, are driven by this kind of reptile theory that's been brought by the plaintiff's bar, and it's really not focused on the facts of the accident itself, and so that leads to discussions about the carrier safety history, things that really shouldn't be revealed to the jury before they make a liability determination, because it just influences their decision. And so, yeah, glad to hear that's one of the big topics.
Yeah, he made that comment as well about, let's get back to the facts of the case and not some of the ancillary topics that are driving these verdicts. And I heard something interesting. This is kind of a side note, but I heard something interesting on that nuclear verdict that just came down in, I believe it was Texas. 30 million, I think it was UPS versus FedEx, with that head-on collision. And it was interesting to hear the plaintiff's bar talk about a $30 million verdict should not be considered a nuclear verdict.
I saw that too. I read that too, and I thought, has this plaintiff's attorney just not been reading the articles that are all about them?
Well, yeah, and I'm trying to understand, okay, what angle are they trying to play with this to where, and maybe it's just it keeps those verdicts quieter than where he wants to be, which is those six-figure ones, 100 million or above, to where, okay, we can settle for 20 or 30 million. It keeps out of the press, and we can keep quietly going on and doing this, because we, as a trucking industry, we are getting loud. We are making a point of saying, with the lawsuit abuse of these nuclear verdicts of 10 million and above. Okay, so if we push that way up, now the settlements for 20 million aren't a big deal. And so I think that's kind of where they're going with that. But it's good to see that this legislation is passing against some of the bad things that are going on against trucking industry, trucking companies. So that was another piece.
I was going to say, I think you're right on with your estimation of they're pushing the upper boundaries. We saw that $1 billion nuclear verdict, and then we're also seeing, this push to desensitize the media and the public to these $30 million judgments, because, like you said, that's going to make it easier to settle those, and it's going to make it less likely that they're going to be overturned, because the shock is just completely gone from these huge verdicts.
Right.
One thing I was going to ask you, you may not know the answer to this question, but some of these other laws that have been put in place, is bifurcation of the case a focus in those laws like it is in Texas? Meaning, is the case separated between liability on the one side and damages on the other in this legislation? Because I know that's one of the things that defense attorneys will ask for regularly, and it's a big fight with the plaintiff's attorney, because obviously they don't want bifurcation. They want to have liability and damages together in the same trial. Are you aware of those laws? Are we seeing that?
No, I'm not aware of it. I think I know what you're asking as far as the punitive side of it. I think some states are having some success moving punitive with the actual AL, but to narrow it down and say they're doing it, they're not, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. I had, looked at the speakers list, and I mean, it's not surprising that the speakers list is just absolutely stacked. I mean, Rebecca Brewster, there's folks from FedEx, Yellow, JB Hunt. Have you had a chance to attend a lot of the speakers' speeches, and do you have any highlights from any of those, or what was your favorite? And you can't say Chris Spear.
Yeah, well, that would be the easy out, but no, I tell you, they had a great one this morning, and I caught most of it. I had to walk off about 3/4 of the way through, but Bob Costello, usually he gets up there and he does the economic state of trucking, and it was interesting because he, instead of just getting up and speaking, which he does so well, he brought a panel up, which was a trucking company owner. I think it was the president of Pilot Flying J, and it was somebody from U.S. Bank. And he would put out, he did a typical graphs and stuff like that he always does. But then he asked for responses from the trucking side, the retail side, and the financial side. And it was good to hear. It was just well done. It was something that you hadn't seen him do before. So that was a good one.
So Bob made waves a little earlier this week, I think, with his estimation on the driver shortage. I think it was reported in a bunch of the outlets that I think he indicated that we're about 80,000 drivers short, and this issue of driver shortage, it comes up a lot, and more recently it seems like there's two sides to that issue. There's OIDA and a bunch of driver groups that say that there really is no driver shortage, that there is more of a driver retention issue, and that's being perceived as a driver shortage. And then you've got folks on the carrier side of things who are saying there's a driver shortage. So I'm curious, did that tension come up at all in any of the groups that you attended or any of the sessions you attended?
No, I think everybody here is pretty much unified in one way of thinking, and that is there is a shortage. Brandon, we were talking a little bit before, and I can understand the wait time issue as far as, all these hours that are lost by drivers sitting and waiting on loads. And, Chris, during his speech, did acknowledge that is an issue. But all in all, if drivers were constantly moving like they should be, or like we would hope they would be, there's still a capacity issue to get covered. Yeah. And we look at some current videos that I've seen online of the New York, New Jersey port or the LA Long Beach port, and there's just lines and lines and lines of trucks.
Yeah.
And whatever the reason is, whether it's they can't get stuff through customs, or there's just not enough longshoremen, or whatever the case is, though those containers are not getting into port like they should. And Bob, one of the things that he talked about was he went shopping over the weekend with his wife, and there was empty shelves.
Yeah.
But production is up. He showed that the U.S. production is up, and where is the stuff? Is it in transit? Is it stuck in customs? Is it in a warehouse, 2 blocks? Is it at the bottom of the ocean? Is it wedged in the Panama Canal? Where is the stuff that shows that we're producing, but it's not getting anywhere?
Yeah.
So, I agree that, waiting time is an issue, but I think there's more than that going on. And, you gave the number of being 80,000 drivers short. Isn't it ironic that number of 80,000 is about the right number of drivers that we've lost to the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
It didn't dawn on me until you said that number.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question to kind of dovetail off the driver shortage. Has the clearinghouse been a topic of discussion so far at MCE? Because, you're right. I mean, we've had a lot of those drivers have drug and alcohol violations recorded in the clearinghouse, and we're just not seeing them going through the SAP process and re-entering the workforce. Has that issue been discussed at MCE or any other clearinghouse related issues?
I think, as a general a general school of thought from the trucking owners and people that I've talked to. It's more of a frustration because, ideally they don't want those drivers for the most part. I understand that there's exceptions to that, but there's also some consequences to even bringing back a driver that's gone through a SAP program, and that's on the insurance side.
Yeah.
Now you may get looked at a little squirrely from the insurance company that, okay, you're bringing people back in. I know they've been through a SAP program, but that's not a good optic at all to have those drivers, in your ranks.
Yeah.
For some insurance companies.
So in theory, if these drivers that have recorded violations in the clearinghouse are currently going through the SAP process but not yet returned to duty, what would you suggest motor carriers do? What discussions should they be having right now as these drivers kind of start re-entering the workforce? I mean, what can a carrier do to get ahead of that?
Well, they have to have the solid written follow-up program, and maybe even go above and beyond what's required by federal law as far as what the follow-up procedures are, is continuing drug testing, continued monitoring and stuff like that, to mitigate as much of the opportunity for someone to relapse or anything like that going forward. It's just I think it's a monitoring thing. That's what a carrier can do, and follow through with it. It's just like anything. If you've got a policy for it, you got to follow it to the T, or it's not even worth having.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a big one, because a lot of carriers want their drivers back, and the ones that have good, solid safety programs and have a way to monitor and follow up on those types of situations are going to be the ones that are going to succeed getting those drivers back.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, we're kind of talking about industry issues and some of the big issues that are coming up there. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the ATRI announcement that happened this past weekend. The big news we saw was ATRI releasing its annual top industry issues. And I bring that up on the screen. Can you kind of run us through what they found in their report?
Yeah, it's a lot of the things that we saw on the carrier side. Really, I don't think it was a huge surprise to anybody. I think what the big surprise is look at the difference between what drivers are concerned with versus what carriers are concerned with. Carriers, they don't have enough drivers. We're not getting paid enough, and we're having obviously issues with truck parking. And I think the motor carriers obviously are concerned with especially the pay and parking, but that's why it was so important to get that in the infrastructure bill on the parking side. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But the compensation on the commercial driver's side has been an issue, and I think what's happening there, to me as a former driver, I think some of the pay structures are outdated, because the freight base has changed to a more regional, either local regional type setup, but the mileage pay is still being paid that way, and drivers are driving a lot less miles than when I was on the road. I was a guy that was gone 3-4 weeks at a time, running from the Midwest to the West Coast, making those 2,700 to 3,000 mile trips. And I really think, or per week, 2,700 to 3,000 miles. And I really think now the average work weeks are less than that, even though the pay is going up. We're seeing some drivers that I wouldn't say are taking advantage of that, but they're thinking, what I was making in 50 hours a while ago, I can make in 40 hours now.
Yeah.
So they're getting paid more, but they're not running as much, or they want to be home every Friday, they want to be home every night and stuff like that, which is, I wish that was an option for me when I was driving, but it just wasn't. But the age-old analogy, especially on when you're getting paid by the mile, if the wheels aren't rolling, you're not making any money.
Yeah, that's right.
So what do you want? Do you want home time? Do you want money? Um, but and the costs or the pay per mile hasn't kept up with the cost of living over the last, I don't know, what would you say, 10 years?
Yeah.
Because when I came off the road at the end of 2011, I was making almost 50 cents a mile. And, I see companies that aren't, and that was W-2, by the way, that wasn't a 1099. And I don't see that big of a jump over the last 10 years. I mean, recently we're starting to see it, and we're starting to see some great big sign-on bonuses and stuff like that, but I don't necessarily think that those are working.
Yeah.
I don't think they're accomplishing what they were meant to do.
Hey, speaking of 1099, obviously AB5 has been a big issue over the last year, and it's going up to potentially Supreme Court review. Has there been any, I assume there's been some discussion of that at MCE?
I think the biggest thing that was talked about here, it was mentioned in Chris's speech, was, a couple of the things that were not in the infrastructure bill, the PRO Act being one of them.
Yeah.
So that was looked at as a success here.
Yeah. I think on AAB5 front, things are kind of quiet now. We're just kind of in a wait and see mode to see if the Supreme Court's going to take the case, and then if the injunction is going to be lifted eventually. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're right. It's a wait and see. That's all we're doing.
Yeah. Some of the other interesting.
I was a little surprised to see the diesel technician shortage. So not only do we have the driver shortage, but the diesel technician shortage. How serious is that? And could you?
It's getting as serious as a driver shortage. We're having problems getting people into that part of the industry, and one of the things that in the workforce development world that I'm a part of, once again, a little side note, is I'm on the Next Gen in Trucking Association's board of directors, and that part of what we're trying to do with the younger people, not only on the driving force, but we've got to get folks into the diesel technician part of the world too.
I read an article yesterday, I think, that said that anticipated that diesel technician shortage will creep its way up that list over the next few years here, and will be one of the top concerns here pretty soon. So yeah, I thought that was interesting as well.
It is, and right now from the state side, I know they're in Indiana where I live. One of the big dealerships there, they have, I think there probably is more than one dealership there. They have their own school. They're once the kids come, and there's some vocational training in high schools around the state, and then it's the Freightliner dealership. They'll bring them in and just continue that training and get them on a career path and to work on their trucks, because they just can't hire enough diesel techs. So they're trying to build their own.
Yeah. The other things we see on that list, there's a lot of regulatory issues that come up on that list. Some I thought were a bit surprising. On the driver side of things, we got hours of service rules. Obviously, that's always an issue for drivers, but I thought it was particularly interesting since we just had some changes to the hours of service rules. What are you hearing, Brian, from drivers about those new rules, and whether it gives them the flexibility that the FMCSA was hoping that it would give them?
I think that, anytime you make a rule change, nobody likes change. And, the drivers are pretty against change. So I think that it's not necessarily giving the flexibility. I think maybe there's a big piece of the driver pool that maybe doesn't understand this particular change, because it does give them the opportunity to stop that 14-hour clock. And that has always been one of the biggest complaints about the way the hour service is set up currently, is you can't stop that 14-hour clock. So I wonder how much of that is just not understanding what the rules actually are now, and you do have that opportunity.
I think that's a big part of it. And then Jared and I have always talked about it's probably also partially due to the fact that a lot of those rule changes benefited local drivers a lot more than long haul drivers with the expansion of the short haul exemption. So I thought that was interesting. And then also on the list here on the driver's side, we've got the ELD mandate. Surprising to see that's still on the list. I mean, you would think at this point we're kind of over that, but it's still up there.
Slowed down a little bit though, didn't it?
I hope
Well,
so.
and it has, and and I think those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, I was on paper until the last 2 years I drove, and then I switched over to electronic logs, and the way that I was set up to run, it helped me. I mean, it just was. But, I think that the absolute zero flexibility from paper versus electronic log, that will always keep ELDs on the list because you don't have any leeway.
I like the word flexibility.
And, flexibility, that gray area that we used to work in. It's not there anymore. But and that's where folks get in trouble using the personal conveyance incorrectly. That was that quote unquote flexibility that was there on paper. So I think ELD mandate will always be on that list because of that particular reason.
Yeah, and the other one, CSA, it seems like that's probably been on there for the last 12 years or so. So, that's another interesting one where we heard a lot over the last 5 years about upcoming changes to the CSA program and, potentially moving to an item response theory type scoring platform. That kind of went radio silent over the last year or so. Have you heard anything more on that, Brian, what we can expect of CSA?
Right now, I think that's another one of those, just like AB5, we're just kind of in a wait and see period on that. It went hot and heavy, switching over to the IRT, and then you're right, it just fizzled. And that one's an interesting one to me for the drivers to be on the list because I once again, I'm not sure drivers as a whole. I never say never, never say always, never say all or none. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding what affects your CSA score, what doesn't affect it, how much does it affect it.
Right. You can't see it on this list. You can't see it on this list. I apologize, it's cut off, but it is right under speed limiters on the commercial driver side of top industry issues, and then on the motor carrier side, it's the fourth one on the list. So it made both lists. And
I think the CSA on the motor carrier list is because that affects number 6. Yeah. A CSA score has bearing on, for an insurance, or an insurance agent, maybe what market we can go to with your account. And if those numbers are not favorable, it affects your rate. Yeah. So I can see why it's such a high score there, and then it being on the driver's side, I wonder how much of that is okay. Here, I'm going to show you your PSP. Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder if it's more and more carriers using PSP as part of their driver qualification process, and drivers are becoming aware of that. Hey, I can't get a job because of my PSP report, so that kind of gets lumped in with CSA. I wonder if that's what's driving that, maybe. Yeah, I think so. And I think that, when a driver may often think that if they get a ticket, that it's going to affect their CSA score. Yeah. No, it doesn't, unless there was a violation that accompanied it. And I think drivers know if they get a ticket and they get a violation with it, okay, if I can get the ticket taken off, now I can get the CSA points knocked down. So everything now is just going to be I sit here and people walk by and they know who I am and I throw pens at them. But I think that knowing that a warning was only issued on the inspection instead of an actual violation, now it affects my CSA score. So, and I don't, the whole scoring piece of that too, when you tell somebody that you have 12 points on a driver's license, that's a no starter for a lot of carriers. But if you tell somebody they got 12 points on their CSA score, what's that mean? that's not really that bad. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one 4-point violation that may not be the end of the world. Um, or if you tell somebody they've got 30 points on
Yeah.
their CSA score, they think,
Uh-huh.
oh my God, my career is over. No,
Uh-huh.
no, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
It scored completely different.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah,
plus,
I
a
was
lot of
gonna
carriers.
say another thing, that probably plays into both the motor carrier frustration as well as the driver frustration is the data queues process. I mean, I think a lot of motor carriers mistakenly think that's a magic bullet to a wrongful violation, but essentially what you're asking is the issuing officer to review again and admit that he or she was wrong, which is a pretty tall order. Do you think that the data queues process feeds into that CSA frustration as well?
It very well may. I'm now small plug at Reliance Partners. We've got a couple specialists on data queues challenges, and they're very, very good at them. Um, the accident ones are usually a lot easier to do, just because you have these 10 criteria. If it falls into one of these 10 things, you can
Yep.
challenge it and have some success. But you're absolutely right. Getting an officer to admit he was wrong. Um, but if there's some way to, were you actually operating under some sort of exemption? During 2020, there was a lot of data queues going on because people were working under certain exemptions to the hours of service rules that, excuse me, maybe the officer wasn't aware of or didn't care and just wrote the violation anyway. So, those are the types of things that can get looked at and overturned. But for a driver to do that on his own, that is extremely difficult to do. Um, Carrier representatives, if your insurance agent has people on staff that knows how to do that, or you end up having to hire somebody um, outside of who you would normally be working with, it can be costly too to get those challenged. But
Yeah.
it could make a definite difference in what your score looks like.
For sure. Brian, any other interesting tidbits from any of the policy committee meetings or anything like that?
I didn't sit in on all of them, obviously, because some of
Yeah.
them ran concurrently. But um, they're all effective. There were some great awards given out during the general sessions. Very, very deserving drivers and companies of safety awards, of charitable awards. There was one. Sorry, guys, got to look at my notes. There was. Yeah, the Premier Achievement Award um, was given to a gentleman named John Lex. As a Walmart transportation driver, and for a year he battled through cancer and still drove and things like that. And he was awarded that. The Frontline Heroes awards were given out, and that was in honor of one gentleman that owns a company. Uh, I'll be darned if I can remember his name. Cully something, down in Louisiana, and he does a lot of disaster relief work, and a driver that volunteers for the Convoys of Hope organization. He's a volunteer driver for them, doing a lot of disaster relief. So those two awards were given out. So some really good feel good stories for the industry, and that's we built up a lot of that goodwill during COVID as an industry.
Yeah.
One of the things that really need to be talked about is, boy, how do we keep that going?
Yeah.
And the
That's awesome.
ATA's got some good programs, but as all of us in the industry are, we got to keep those types of things going and keep the positive image for trucking going, because that is one thing that is, I think, that's hurting us um, in the hiring of new talent within the industry, is just the image, the damage to the image of the industry.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the most important question of all: did you get any good swag at the exhibition hall? Did you pick up any good,
Yeah, I mean,
stress
you gotta,
relievers?
It's funny that you say that. I usually do go ahead and do the goodie grab at some point during the show, and here's the reason why. My daughter is a driver manager um, for night transportation, and I love to give all that stuff to her, and she puts it out for her drivers to pick up. So,
Nice.
it helps her score some brownie points with her drivers. So that's the reason that I do it. But I am got a nice new cat scales die cast truck that'll go up on the wall when I get home.
Excellent. All right. Now you got a load of Trucksafe keychains coming your way. I'm going to mail them to you. Actually, we just live right down the street from one another, so I'll just bring them over to you.
Yeah, just drop them on my front doorstep.
I've got way too many of those things. They're taking over my house.
Yeah. Well, you get back out in the conference tour again next year, and you already got your swag to give away.
There we go. Yeah, for sure. Jared, any other questions you got for Brian?
No, I really appreciate you giving us a quick update on MCE21. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem, guys. I'm happy to do it. And a little plug for our one coming up here in a few weeks, Brandon. We're going to be talking again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, make sure everybody you tune in on November 11th, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Brian is going to join us along with Hayden Cardiff from Idelic, and we're going to be talking all about driver qualification, driver onboarding, driver orientation, all of those kind of issues that go about bringing on board a driver and getting them engaged early on so that you can hopefully retain them and you're not just burning through them. And so we've got a lot of great content planned for that. So again, that's November 11th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So be sure to tune in.
Yeah, that's the first step. You never have a second chance to make a first impression. So as a company, as a group, not only are you wanting the driver to make a good impression on you, but you need to make a good impression on those folks too.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Brian, we really appreciate it. Where can people find more about Reliance Partners?
ReliancePartners.com. You can email me at brian.runnels@reliancepartners.com. And, we're here for anything you need insurance-wise, safety-wise. And it was just great to be on today.
All right. Well, take care. Safe travels home, and hope you enjoy whatever kind of entertainment you're going out tonight. I think you're heading home tomorrow, right?
I am heading home tomorrow. There's a reception and a dinner tonight, and I think that's about it. I'm about done.
ready to be back home. I know that feeling.
Yeah. One more meeting before then, and then we're ready to roll.
All right, Brian. Take care. Safe travels.
Thanks, Brian.
We'll talk to you later.
All right, guys. Thanks. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon.